Okay, we're going to call to order the special meeting of the Albany Unified School District Board of Education for Tuesday, May 15th, 2018. May we have a roll call, please?
Sorry. President Black?
Here.
Vice President Stapleton Gray?
Here.
Board Member Blanchard?
Here.
Board Member Clark?
Here.
Board Member Trutane?
Here.
Student Board Member Silwa?
Here.
Okay, so the first item. First item is to approve the agenda. There's only one item on the agenda, so I don't think it probably takes a lot of debate. Can we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So we have this one item. It's a review and action item, work study on elementary school construction. Superintendent?
Thank you, President Black. Welcome, everybody, those who are on our work study panel, and for those of us who are in the audience. What I'd like to do, first of all, is just thank you all. We have a robust panel of what I'm going to call experts in their field, those who have experience, as well as our board members. The purpose of tonight's work study session is for the Board of Education to determine how AUSD can best satisfy educational needs, expand capacity, improve facilities, and build a permanent district office at the Ocean View site with the $41.5 million that is budgeted. Before I go over the format, I would like if we can very quickly and briefly go around. Please introduce yourself and just say maybe what company you're from or who you represent. I know each table is sharing a microphone, so we're going to practice sharing today. Okay? And can I start over on this side here?
Good evening. My name is Bob Alton, President of Alton Construction, and we are a school builder since 1995.
I'm Ian Kelso, Tipping Structural Engineers.
Stephen Neef, second grade teacher at Marin.
My name is Alan Daly. I'm a mechanical engineer and a community member here in Albany, and I've been involved for the last about 2-3 years on the Community Integrated Design Committee that's been advising the schools through the series of construction projects.
My name's Heather Duncan. I'm the principal at Cornell Elementary.
Melissa Poole, principal at Marin Elementary.
And I'm Terry Georgeson, principal here at Ocean View Elementary.
Juan Barroso, program manager, assisting the district with the bond program.
Douglas Crancer, Ryland School Business Consulting, interim CBO.
Paul Black, School Board.
Ross Stapleton Gray, School Board.
Charlie Blanchard, Board of Education.
Jacob Clark, School Board member and a parent of 2 children at Cornell.
Kim Trutane, board member, a parent of a AMS and an AHS student.
Right, there we go. Mahima Solwal, senior at AHS and also student school board member.
Kevin Corcoran, 4th grade teacher at Ocean View.
Howard McNetty, Citizens Bond Oversight Committee and Facilities Planning Committee.
Jeff Bond with the City of Albany.
Jorge Rico with HY Architects.
Kim McNeely, 27-year school district bond program manager, currently at Livermore School District.
Alan Burkett, Integrated Design Committee and Capital Committee, and parent.
I'm David Hoffman, assistant principal at the middle school. Okay, thank you all very much.
Excuse me, just for a second. I know it's a pain talking into these microphones, but the meeting is recorded, so please try to talk into the mic, even though it's not convenient.
And David, I will give you back this microphone in a minute. Okay, so tonight's format is for the board to have briefly discuss any questions or topics or information that they need to help inform them to consider next steps. And then open this up to the what I'm going to call the panel of experts here to provide information, clarification, and to help the board as they ask their questions and eventually lead to some decision making. There will be time for public comment, and the public comment, once we kind of conclude with our discussion or get to a place where we can break, the microphone is over here to my left, your right, and there are speaker slips where Julie is. Julie, please wave. Okay. And each of you has some documents. I know I provided them. It's been published on our website, but the people here on the panel, you have it in front of you. You have the AUSD building program, the board backup, and then there are some scenarios. And so I'd like to open this up first to our school board and our student board member. Are there any questions that arise for you that our panel can discuss that will help frame the discussion or help the board as we move on this path? And I am going to chart on this side, and I'm going to ask our new Director of Human Resources, Cheryl Cotton, to chart on this side. And so I'm going to open this up to the board.
Well, let's just go through the board. Mahimo, if you have any questions you want to ask, why don't you start?
Yeah, so it's not really a question, but I think it would be a great way to start if we could just, sort of frame what we're talking about tonight, maybe like a thesis or, what's going on. And also, I'm very curious as to the financial implications of this project.
Okay.
That was a good start. Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. I just want to add that I think that this is the right way to tackle a big question like this. There's a huge price tag attached to rebuilding Ocean View and Marin, and having a group of experts here and community members and educators so that we can together decide the best path forward certainly gives me more confidence that the right decisions will be made. I guess I'll frame my question this way. There's certainly a lot that needs to be done here at Ocean View. That's clear, and I think that's commonly understood. I know that, because we've been overcrowded and in a squeeze, that we have converted what were the locker rooms over here to classrooms. And that's something that you do when space is tight and when you have to, and you do it with a good attitude. But now we have the bond funds, and we can do better. We can put our students into a classroom that's designed for education. So with holding that idea, I would still like to know if there is possibly something where it might be of value to save it. Are you guys prepared to put up the site plan for what we have here currently?
Yes, we have the site map for Ocean View that we can bring up.
Okay, if you could. Oh, okay, that's too high for, I thought that, I thought it would be something we'd be able to point at. Anyhow, okay, only people who know what's where know what the 5th grade wing is. The current map, yeah.
Yeah, don't point it at an airplane.
Okay, that'll work. I'm sorry for the delay. Okay. So anyhow, I was saying, so like right there, we have what's been called the fifth grade wing. And I wonder if maybe that could be a potential location for a district office in the future. I don't even think that the regulations would require that to be retrofitted, because some of you guys might know that we've begun the move of our district office out of University Village, and we're going to have some offices spread around here in Albany, and some other offices have to move to Berkeley. So they're going to be on Bancroft over in Berkeley. And when I see our largest site here at Ocean View, and with a plan, at least a current plan that I don't think includes a district office, I'm thinking about trying to find a way to make that happen. So I guess what my question is, what's our value package here? How can we get the very most out of the bond dollars so that we satisfy our students' needs and the needs of the school district overall? So that's my big question. And my second thing that I wanted to start out by pointing out is that I heard recently that there's an easement that runs under the playground. And I don't know if when the plan was created for the new Ocean View design, if that plan accommodated the complications that easement might present. And lastly, and it's my last point, I'm going to hand it over. We've been hearing a lot about crossing guards and parking and dropping kids off, and the importance of trying to get as many of our children as possible to walk or bike to school. And I'd also like to try to revisit the idea of perhaps having a car drop-off area on Buchanan, and then perhaps a pedestrian bike entrance along Jackson, so that we can separate out our car traffic and our pedestrian traffic. So, those are the things that I would like to hear addressed tonight.
So yeah, I would just like to suggest that maybe we go over the 4 scenarios that are on page 5 for the audience here and for the audience who may be watching that from home. I don't know if everyone had a chance to look at it. I'm sure most people did, but it's just one page, so at least people kind of have an idea on the 4 options that we're considering, and it looks like we're mainly focusing on 2 of them. That was just a suggestion. I don't know, if anybody agrees, but.
No, I think that's a good idea, Jacob. Do you have other questions, or did you want to do that first and then ask your question?
Well, I just didn't want to jump in and start. I wanted to I thought there would be some kind of laying the groundwork. This is what what Mahima was saying a little bit before.
Were you planning to do that?
Yes, what I wanted to do was to give the board a chance to ask any questions, so that when we open up and talk about these scenarios, that we're actually addressing some of what the board would like us to move in the direction towards. So yes, we will definitely get to those scenarios, but I wanted the board to have a chance to ask any questions or bring up any issues that maybe they wanted to start the discussion with our panel.
All right, so I'm good for now then.
Okay, Charlie?
Thanks. How's that? Is that working okay? So my comments are very general. What I'm hoping to get out of tonight's meeting is some more sharply focused questions. And I hope we can either get answers to those questions tonight, or we can figure out how we're going to get answers to those questions. So I want to contribute 2 questions to the potential list. The first one is, how much Measure B and E bond money are we ready to commit to the Ocean View and Marin projects, considered in relation to the project lists that were in those bond measures? So my second question is, given whatever budget constraints we come up with, how can we increase capacity the most, get the best possible school classrooms and spaces, and get best value for our limited resources first at Ocean View and then later at Marin?
You only ask easy questions, Charlie.
So which of these microphones really works?
This one works pretty good.
That was a good one. Okay. All right. I may be the person most skeptical of some of the numbers and assumptions, et cetera, and most concerned about some variables that we should start thinking about, including, say, the risk that if we have, say, a Governor Newsom who's really pushing for, say, universal pre-K, if we end up getting a mandate for nursery school, et cetera, we could see a huge capacity increase at a time when we might have spent all our money to just more or less maintain where we are. So I've been on the board for about 3.5 years. When I came on the board, it was the era of we could get 2 schools built for us by the state for free, and that kind of didn't happen, so we went and launched into the bond thing. And from my perspective, I arrived and the bus was already moving on, let's replace these schools. And the impetus was this seismic report, et cetera. But if you go back and read the thing, and I'll read a line verbatim from the seismic report. We would recommend that these deficient elements be strengthened as part of an overall seismic retrofit program. Retrofits of this nature are commonly performed and are often can be implemented economically and with minimal impact to the function or appearance of the buildings. The people that did this on the ground, okay, now 6 years ago now, weren't saying, wow, if you retrofitted, it'd cost you maybe $20 million. So I'm really, and I know we've never been presented as the board with any analysis of what it would cost just to fix the seismic issues. Okay? When I arrived on the board, there were 2 scenarios, really. The 2 scenarios we're hearing again here. Well, what if we beefed up this site with stuff we wanted and had to do all the retrofit and necessarily, et cetera, and adding a second story, it's wow, that would be a lot. Or let's just knock it down and rebuild it. And I think that gave us a kind of a apples and apples comparison of 2 pretty pricey solutions. And there was never any real attention to what would it cost to fix what we have. And why I think that's really important is I don't think we'll have enough money to do 2 schools. I just don't think it's there. I've been in some of the discussions where Alan, before he left, was saying, well, if we pare back AMS and we pare back the high school annex and we don't build a district office, we could probably come in $3 million under where we need to be, but maybe, that's no way to run a railroad when there's a risk of things like a new mandate to take in preschoolers or a recession or construction cost overage. I'd hate to cut it really close and know we were going to come in short. So I'll be, say, advocating that we consider building on this site, like the 14 classrooms that were in that annex in the original plan for Ocean View, and then move on and look at Marin. because then we've got all of this existing school that probably won't fall down, and if we spend a couple $1 million on it, might really not probably fall down. I'd really like that to be looked at more than I think it has been. I mean, if I'm reading the original seismic survey saying, you should fix this now, in 2015, they said it again after the earthquake, the Napa earthquake. But we've never seen numbers that said, well, if you put X million into it, you'd have it up to the current code for seismic.
Thanks. Okay, I'd come in kind of with Kim and Ross in the sense that I think the 4 scenarios here don't begin to cover the possibilities. I agree with Jacob that we need to discuss these 4 scenarios, but I'd really like to see a scenario that considered what can be retrofitted at Ocean View, what should be built, what could be turned into a district office. It seems like there should be room here. There's one plan that has the complete rebuild plan has a single-story administration building. Could that be a 2-story building? How much more would that cost? There's room in the complete rebuild plan for extra classrooms possibly in the future. I'm not sure how to factor that in because we don't have plans for extra money possibly in the future. I think I have the same concern as a couple of other board members have expressed it, not really having enough money. And I really want to look at how to come in. I mean, the students come first. We definitely need to have a plan that will satisfy all the educational needs. That's beyond question. And if that means giving up the district office, then, so be it. But if in fact we could keep some buildings without seismic retrofitting, and it said so in here, I'd never heard that before, and use those for offices, well, we should consider leaving them in place and building around them or next to them. And I just don't think we have all the scenarios here. Also, the costs here in the plan are a little bit confusing. They don't seem to add up when you go through them. Some or all of them include $2 million for temporary housing, which we heard in the last board meeting we're not going to have to spend. So I want to know how that affects this and the Marin plans. So that's enough questions for now. Yeah, we're trying, but these mics get overloaded pretty quickly, and then it's even worse. But yeah, we'll try.
Yes, unfortunately, we only had, I think, like 11 mics total, so everyone is sharing. Okay, so we have several questions and also need to go through the scenarios. And so one was how we're going to frame the discussion. So Mahim, I think now that we've heard some of the questions, I might be kind of helping you with that. The budget, and can the current 5th grade wing, can that be the district office? I think might actually go maybe hand in hand with what buildings are available to be used that doesn't necessarily have to be retrofitted. How do we maximize student needs? Use the most of our bond dollars to get the most of our student and district needs. How can we, there's a comment about student drop-off on Buchanan. How much of Measures B&E are we willing to commit? And given budget constraints, how can we increase capacity the most and best be used in terms of value at Ocean View and Marin? And a very specific question, what is the cost to retrofit? And then, of course, a scenario that considers what can be retrofitted, what can can be inclusive of a district office, extra classes in the future. Can we keep some buildings that do not need to be retrofitted? And then what about the $2 million that is no longer going to be used for temporary student housing? So is there any particular question that the board would like for us to start with, or would you like to go right into the scenarios? Because I heard clearly that there might be another scenario we could come up with.
I think you should start with the 4 scenarios, and then we can go into maybe, especially with the architects in the room, maybe we can start thinking about other possible scenarios.
Okay? And so, and I apologize, we can probably try and make this a little bit bigger, but I know everybody has the scenarios in front of them. And then, of course, I have to find my reading glasses. Charlie Blanchard, yes, sir.
Yeah, you're probably planning to say this already, Val, but I think it maybe is worth repeating that these first 3 came from presentations at previous board meetings. These were not derived for this board meeting. They are from previous board meetings. The last scenario is intended as one example of what Paul has suggested, looking at kind of a mix and match scenario, but it's only one possible example. So I just wanted to clarify that the cost estimates have been presented previously, the designs have been presented previously, so this is not new material, but it's just consolidated into this one page.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so for scenario A, demolish and build new. So we demolish all existing buildings and replace them based on the current project design, remove the existing portables. This does not include a district office. Space may be available at current enrollment. So this is about 57,000 square feet, includes 34 classrooms and after school plus 8 specialty rooms. The estimated cost is $38 million, and that says it includes $2 million for temporary housing, so we would take the $2 million off of that. Scenario B, seismic retrofit and renovate. This is a seismic upgrade and complete renovation of the existing school. Achieves all code requirements, does not add space or include the district office. 41,000 square feet renovated. Current total of 46,000 square feet consists of 31 classrooms and after school, 4 specialty rooms, some portables. Without the portables, it's a total of 41,000 square feet, and the estimated cost here was $28 million, but that includes the $2 million for temporary housing. Scenario C, renovate and add second story. Seismic upgrade and complete renovation of the existing school. This option adds a partial second story. The existing portables will be removed from the site. This does not include the district office, and it's 51,000 square feet, 41,000 square feet renovated, plus 10,000 square foot second story facing Jackson Street. Estimated cost is $36 million, but that includes the $2 million for temporary housing. Scenario D is a combination of new building and renovation. Build a new classroom building, seismic upgrade and complete renovation of existing buildings, possibly for the library, site admin, after-school art and science. We would use some of the existing buildings for the district office, where the seismic upgrade is not required. At least 55,000 square feet, at least 14,000 square feet new construction, plus 41,000 square feet renovated. Estimated cost $40 million. And those are the...
Not everyone in the audience has the copy of the agenda packet, but there are diagrams for scenarios A and C in the packet, so maybe you could show those and talk about them a little bit for the audience.
So I think the question came up is what would be the cost of retrofitting? And I think if we can handle that with a pretty solid number, that would at least answer one of the questions directly. And I would like to open that up
Val,
to...
can we talk about these diagrams
Oh,
first?
absolutely, sure. Would the board like to talk about it?
Well,
Yes, please.
no, you can present them, but just for the audience's sake, this is the total rebuild.
This is for the total rebuild.
And
So
the second floor is on the left, first floor is on the right. So why is this an attractive plan? Why, I mean, some people are going to want this. Clearly, the people who designed it thought it was the best school that they could come up with. Can you or someone talk to why this is attractive?
Yes, I can get a start, but I really would like to turn over to Terry Georgeson, who is also a part of all of these meetings. The building layout was, we looked at it from a student safety point of view, so that if you look at the buildings that are on Jackson Street, that would actually not be the playground area. It's buildings facing one of our busiest streets. It also has our parent drop-off and parking on, see, they went right out of my head, on Monroe. And then, Jackson, thank you, Jackson. And then it moves the library. So Terry, do you want to talk a little bit more about the configuration?
Yeah, thank you. I guess the first thing I'd like to say is this design was created out of a process that brought the public, our parents, and the staff into talking about what is it we currently have at our school that we want to preserve. In other words, what are the concepts of our school, as well as what are their greatest needs that this school can't provide us. So if you note down at the bottom in the picture on the right, you see 2 parking lots. And in the front of the school off Jackson, you see a drop-off and pickup. We spent a lot of time talking about traffic flow, the need for parents to be able to get out of their car, particularly for those of the youngest students. Staff parking is always a struggle here. And then even since this design was created, now all of the parking connected to UC that's not resident parking is now $12 a day rental. In other words, you have to pay to park. So we're already experiencing the community in the UC Village parking in the parking in front of our school.
Is it possible to turn off the lights in the front to make it easier to see the screen?
And
so
Terry, can you also explain why the kinder building was also moved to this section
right,
as well?
The purpose of the parking and location of where these buildings sit have partially to do with the parents who have the greatest need to get out of their car are going to be the kinder parents. We needed a drop-off pickup zone for all families. The NPR sits closely to where we're sitting now with the opportunity to keep it large, add an amphitheater, which was an amphitheater, as you guys walk through, we currently have. So again, it's a concept of part of the school that we really appreciate and want to put in a place that would offer not only use for the school, but one of the things we recognize is this is the biggest footprint in the district at the elementary, and we want to truly be able to offer the community access to this building. And the multi-purpose room was one of the rooms in which we really felt that if it was able to be created the way we were thinking of, one, it does a couple things. It offers a community access, and it keeps our kids. It addresses one of the biggest headaches we have right now. Where we sit right now is where lunch is, and the playground is on the opposite side of the school. So at lunch, our students have to travel from here all the way down there. Supervision is always a challenge. So the distance that our kids have to travel really takes away from a lot of our instructional time and just pathway and supervision. So when we went through this with the public and we went through it with the staff, parking, the location of our NPR, public access to the building and use of the building, and an open courtyard in the middle, so that we offer outdoor space for learning space for students, which allowed us to build the building kind of in a perimeter around from Buchanan and Jackson. We did talk about Buchanan as a pickup drop-off zone, but because Buchanan is a one-way street, and in order for families to get to Buchanan in front of our school, they would have to go west, flip a U-E, and then come back. So the traffic on Buchanan is already pretty heavy, and we felt by creating it on that side, we'd only be adding to the traffic on Buchanan. So these were lots of things that we took into account. Honestly, the main thing we didn't take into account was cost, because at the time, the design was really around creating a school, pulling from what we have, what we like, what we think works well, and build from there.
Thanks. Now could we see the, let's see, I think it's scenario C. Scenario C, renovate and add second story.
Right, the two graphics we have are the current footprint of Ocean View, and then we had the proposed. Those are the two visuals that we had.
There was one that showed a second story. Somewhere.
Oh, scroll down.
Page 7.
So that was option one,
Yeah,
second
it's a little
story
hard to
addition.
see. The second story is on the right there with the dashed red line.
Where?
No, no,
The upper right
no.
corner.
There.
Right there.
Okay, so does anyone care to describe what this involves? I think an important point here is that renovation is not just seismic retrofitting.
Yes, in this case would be seismically retrofitting the buildings that needed it, but adding on the second story here. But the basic configuration would look the same.
Right, but renovation means more than seismic retrofitting.
Yes, you'd have.
Right? One is,
Yeah, one. Can you?
you want to describe
more?
what else is involved in a renovation?
Sure. So I'm going back to your description in the board packet of scenario C, right? Which is renovate
Yes.
and add second story. So there's a number of components that go into this project, and Val, you have listed an estimated cost of $36 million. And your note says that total included $2 million set aside for temporary housing, which at this point we're expecting would not be needed, right? So the components that go into that total number start with the seismic safety work, which is what was identified by the engineers when they did their studies. There was actually two studies by structural engineers of the seismic issues, and ultimately WLC put together a set of plans that was submitted to DSA that had a lot more of the details of where the deficiencies were, the corrections, and so forth. So I did an estimate of that work, just the seismic work. My construction cost number was about $3.8 million, and then adding soft costs and so forth got us to a total project cost for that line item, the seismic safety work, of 4.8. 4.8. So that would be kind of step one in developing the project, is addressing the seismic concerns. And in doing that, you do a lot of cutting into the finishes of the building. You would have to remove some of the systems to access the areas of the work, like electrical, possibly mechanical systems, fire alarm systems that you would have to take down to create the access. And during that process, we also included a full kind of interior renovation of the spaces, which would be new finishes, new carpets. At that point, would also include new lighting, new mechanical systems, and so forth. So that constitutes kind of your renovation of the school, seismic issues aside. And that number totaled $13.8 million. So you could also think about it in the scenario where if you just set out to renovate the spaces and did not have seismic issues, the budget would be in the 13.8 ballpark. The cost of the second story, which is probably the area where it is an educated guess, because there is no design for that portion of the project, came up to about 8.1 million, which in my opinion, not a cost-effective way to add square footage, because you're building on top of an existing building that is going to reveal a lot of technical challenges. It's an expensive way to go, but we priced out that scenario. And then there are additional components that would be required to make the project whole, from the point of view of the Department of Education, from the point of view of Division of State Architect, who would at that point be looking for the district to address all accessibility issues on the site, which would include accessible path of travel from the public right-of-way to the different points within the school. A big component of that would also be restrooms. So the restrooms would all have to be brought up to current accessibility standards so that all students can be served. And then I also broke out a line item for energy efficiency improvements that I think would go along with the project, which is in line with the board's policy on sustainable design and construction. So there's quite a few components of the project. The breakdown that we put together in 2015 is included in the board packet, and I believe that's where Val got her totals. So the site development cost, which would include the components that Terry described, the improvements to the traffic and parking flow, which is an area that the Department of Ed really focuses on for student and parent safety, about 3.6 million. The general accessibility improvements, the restrooms being the biggest part of that, but also other things like ramps and handrails and accessibility throughout the site, 1.8 million, and the energy efficiency enhancements, about 2 million. Correct. Right.
Charlie.
So we're sort of slipping naturally into considering costs, which I think is appropriate. I think I would observe that all of the cost numbers that we've been working with, including the table that Juan has referred to, which is in page 19 of the agenda packet, date to the summer of 2015. And I wonder if any of our panel could actually give us a multiplier to convert the cost numbers that we're looking at, which are 2015 cost estimates, to what you expect 2019 or 2020 dollars to be.
So if I could make a clarification, to the numbers that I provided in 2015 assumed that the district would embark on the projects in 2017. So I attempted to provide you 2017 numbers.
And I guess maybe then let me refine my question. Relative to what you provided us, what should we realistically expect for embarking on a project in 2019 or 2020?
Would anybody
We're just about to
like
go into a big recession, so I think it'll be cheaper.
Maybe I could speak to what we're using as another district. I was the director in Dublin for 15 years, and We had a lot of growth there. We were using, and I would invite the rest of the group to offer, other thoughts, but we were using 5% escalation a year for budgeting purposes.
So yeah, I had brought this up before too. I'm kind of concerned about the issue. So you said 5% per year. So if these are 2017 numbers, would that be 5% each year? So another 15% on top of what we're looking at?
That is a compound escalation, yes. And in
So
this
it's even
bid,
more than 15%.
and I would say in this bid climate, with as many bond dollars as on the market in a 25-mile radius of this district, I think that's a reasonable number to use. It's again, what we were using for many years.
So that's a big difference.
So I was offering as a director of facilities in a couple of districts for the last 25 years in the Bay Area, in Alameda County. We were using 5% a year escalation, and we thought that was a reasonable number for budgeting purposes. We'd sometimes come in a little under that, but for planning purposes, we tried to be conservative. There's a lot of bond dollars in a 25-mile radius of Dublin, $2.5 billion on the market. And so we're competing with a lot of other districts with schools construction. So those are the numbers we were using.
Sorry, this is my first study session, so I don't know if I could jump in for just a second. I thought it'd be interesting just to clarify the beginning bond measure B, because we've been talking about these scenarios and the seismic upgrades. And the original bond measure was to rebuild Marin and Ocean View elementary schools with seismically safe school facilities, but also support modern learning standards in subjects such as science, math, humanities, and relieve overcrowding. So I think it's important to know that along with these scenarios that it's not just seismic and that there's a lot of other things that need to be put in there as well. So, thank you.
So the language of the bonds is though very, very generous in terms of what could happen. So if the Safeway burned down, the district could acquire that property because goodness knows we'd love another place to build on. There's a lot of latitude in what's there. Putting my risk hat on again, we also have to note that doing anything with either of the elementary sites is contingent on both the AMS and AHS annexes being complete, so we have somewhere to put the kids. And so if you're going to worry about, the cost if we start at given X year, both those projects do need to come in on time or we'll slip a year, and that will have a big impact on the cost of money and the cost of construction.
One, just for clarification, I was adding up these numbers for scenario C. Is that totally 37.7 million? Is that about right? I added the 4.8 plus 13.8 plus 8.1. Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry, and then 7.4. I think I might be off.
Val, I think they should total 34.
34, thank you. Thank you. I think I added a number twice. Does anybody else want to comment on scenario C? Okay. Is there another scenario that the board would like to examine and open up for discussion?
Kim has suggested the idea that there are retainable buildings, I guess I would say, on this site. For anyone who's looked at the Marin plans, it's amusing to note that buildings G and H, which you would know as the boxy rectangular things at the furthest south end of the campus, are slated to be left there because they're fine. And they were left there when the last time Marin was torn down and the new one was built. Those are seemingly indestructible. So looking at this site, I've brought my daughter here for Y&G meetings, et cetera. I haven't had a kid here other than to sort of drop in. But this is a rather imposing site. We're in a larger room than the new plan would build for a multi-use room. we have absolutely seismic issues, but I'm seeing numbers in the low few millions to address the seismic. And I'm just certainly wondering what else could be done to retain things on this campus, including maybe the largest part of all of the buildings here, and building a new annex per this plan, those buildings along the Buchanan Road that don't land on anything except blacktop now. So I'd look at the picture like this and say, well, what if you took away that quarter? Or what if you removed the middle and left buildings there and put a playground? And we have the luxury to say anything that we could keep, we could try to keep. This map also doesn't show to the left of the multi-use room, which I presume is chock full of portables, but which could become a playground by removing the portables. To the left of the purple is that, which is currently, I understand, a number of portables, right? That's like the aftercare. I mean, if you decided, well, we're going to put portables up on the northern end where Buchanan is and make that a playground, your playground is suddenly next to the multi-use room. So I think we should unstick a bunch of constraints that we're holding fixed and say, if we had this property and we had this building and we could go in with the surgical knife and the retrofitting dollars, what could we have and then what could we add to it? I'd call that, the open-ended scenario D.
So I'm going to ask if we could look at the other version of the current site plan that we had up there a few minutes ago, which actually shows a little bit broader view.
I'm curious, while that's being pulled up I'm not as familiar with the Ocean View site as I am with the Marin site, and I'm curious if retrofitting addresses the size of the classrooms. My understanding is that the space in the current classrooms, while we're in a large building here, a large facility, my understanding is the space of the current classrooms is smaller than what is ideal for the kinds of learning spaces that are, that are being recommended. So I'm curious if anybody can speak to that.
Thanks. I'd like to jump in there. One of the largest concerns came from our kindergarten teachers. And as some of you know, this was once a middle school campus. So the classrooms that are occupied by kindergarten teachers are a significant percent smaller than they should be. That not only are they physically smaller, but because they're teaching kindergarten, they aren't able to store the materials, the early education play centers and whatnot. So excuse me, that was a primary concern. Another thing, no pun intended. Another concern is safety. And if we retrofit and redesign, we're not addressing a pretty significant concern, which is our campus is really porous. We have a lot of entry points from all over, and for both people to access campus and for kids to escape if they're having things like that are a concern. And lastly, one of the things we attempted to do, and I was on the committee that designed the rebuild for Ocean View. And Kim, part of what we considered was we put that building on Buchanan so that the easement runs in the empty spot. So when you look at the design, that empty spot is where the easement runs. Yeah. So those are the big points. Thanks.
So I do actually have a number of kind of more specific questions, and I'm not sure I want to put them all out there at once, but since I think we were kind of talking about the size of classrooms, let me start with that. I'm actually very familiar with this campus because it was a middle school when my daughter started middle school, and so I'm pretty familiar with the campus. I'm very much aware that in the main classroom building, there's 16 principal classrooms arranged in 4 groups of 4. And each of those was set up originally with just a partition between a pair of classrooms. And it's now, that partition is now sort of a partition wall that freely transmits sound, or more or less freely transmits sound between classrooms. But what I wonder is, if we really looked at this, is there a possibility of turning what had been two undersized classrooms into one significantly sized classroom? So instead of having, what are they now, 750 square feet or something like that, when they should be 960 square feet, but you could have a 1,500 square foot classroom by removing those partition walls. It's a question more than an observation. It's something I'm curious about whether that would even be possible.
If I may comment on that, I think in theory that's a great idea. I mean, understanding that you're cutting your classrooms in half by opening it up and making it a larger room. But the thing you're not taking into account is the design of the room. It would be almost an L-shaped room. And even as a middle school, because I taught here at the time, we rarely opened up that partition because we found there were so many blind spots that it really required almost 3 adults to supervise that space for middle school because of the way the room was configured. So we tried using that even with middle school by opening it up, but it still doesn't accommodate the needs of the number of children we want to put in the space with the proper supervision. A lot of blind spots.
Okay, so can we switch to the new plan? Thanks. Okay. So I see that that blank space from left to right, separating that classroom wing up there on Buchanan. When you have to, when you're constructing across an easement like that, can one of the construction folks here comment on what measures you have to take? I mean, is this the city's easement? Is this City of Albany?
Hi, everyone. Jeff Bond again with the City of Albany. Yes, it is a city easement. There is a large storm drain, I think it's 84 inches, and 2 large 15-inch sewer lines that are running east and west through that area. So there's certainly no harm in having a playground or any sort of outdoor activity, but you don't want to construct any structures over that.
If I could add, that easement's 30 feet wide, so you can't put anything on it. So that's why that classroom building is snug up against the Buchanan property line.
Okay, and that easement begins immediately north of the current library? Does somebody who knows the current plans could probably speak to that?
It passes east to west through the entire property, so it's just a no-build zone.
Okay.
So I think we're on the topic of the easement and the geography of the site at this point. I'm wondering, from all of those who are gathered here, I know we've got a lot of architectural and engineering and construction expertise. As I look at the concepts, knowing that we have that easement running east to west, separating that northernmost classroom building from everything else on the site. And knowing that all of our existing infrastructure is south of the easement, where we're sitting now, the main classroom building and so forth, are there cost considerations that we should be aware of in placing a classroom building north of the easement rather than, say, concentrating new buildings on the existing footprint of buildings where we already have infrastructure?
I'm trying to make this work. Usually when you do an entirely new campus on an existing site, it's sometimes difficult or problematic to reuse existing utilities, and more often than not, we just assume that new services will be brought in. And a lot of times it's because either utilities are undersized or they're just, 30, 40 years old and are nearing their replacement.
Okay, so are there any barriers to bringing in new utilities for that classroom building? I mean, there's an easement to the south, streets to the north and the east, and a ballpark or a soccer field to the west.
If I may take a shot at answering the question, I think we could probably work it out so you could run things like water lines and power lines from the south part of from the south side to the north side without affecting the city's easement. Those existing sewer and storm drain lines are probably 6 or 8 feet deep, and we can work with you to run something over the top.
I have a question here about process, about what we're trying to accomplish tonight. We're not going to design the new school here in this meeting. I don't think that's possible. I think that what we should be trying to do is decide the direction we want to go. For example, if we decided that the best thing we can do for the students is to tear down the existing school and build an entirely new one, then that would be a decision. It wouldn't have to be this school. If we decided that what we wanted to do was use any existing structures that we could use and build where necessary in order to bring it up to a level that we were happy with, that would be a decision. I have a feeling from the process that I've gone through with the 2 new structures that we're currently working on, that if you say, these are the constraints, this is the budget, and open it up for bids from design build teams, we'll get innovative solutions that nobody here has thought of. And that would be the way we would come up with the final plan. So I'm hoping that what we can get tonight is just a decision about what we want to present to the design build teams as their goal, rather than try to come up with the final design, which I don't think we can do. Kim and then Jacob.
So given what you just said, Paul, I would really like to hear from our construction people at the table to just get a reality check on if we're being realistic. You've seen the sort of square footage on the various scenarios, and even though I understand that some of the other board members may not want to spend the $41.5 million here at this site, is basically $40 million a reasonable amount to build a new school, or is that pie in the sky? I'd like to hear some opinion.
Jacob.
Since I'm the only contractor here, I guess I can put my foot in my mouth here in front of everybody. Keeps on going in and out here. I think it's dangerous to start doing the retrofit. To be honest with you, we're finding there's more and more things that pop up. we're in one right now where all the utilities, you were just mentioning the utilities, and it's unforeseen, and those are not budgeted in those, in your original cost. I think your budget looks pretty good at this point. I think that 5% increase per year is pretty accurate. I would almost say 5 to 8%. We're in the public bidding market. There's a group of companies that do this type of work. People are wondering if the fires are going to be an impact, but I think maybe for material, and then the tariffs that they just shot up. A couple of weeks ago, the steel went up, and then it went back down. So it's an uneasy time to predict perfectly, but I think when you have a scenario like this, when you're talking about safety issues with the kids and trying to get the fencing up and the access and the parking, it just seems to me that it's a perfect scenario for a complete demolish and new. I think you're better off in the long run. But
Thanks, Jacob.
So yeah, I wanted to state that I would definitely like to come up with a decision too for the next steps, but cost is a serious, real issue. I don't want to be in the position of us going over budget and being in a situation where Marin doesn't have enough money left to have the proper improvements done. So I do want to have both schools rebuilt, and that's what the measures look like. The wording was that, and that's what the voters asked for, and I want to do what the voters asked for, but at the same time, the money issue is real. It just seems like it's kind of, we're talking about it, but it's not really, this is what it's, I mean, I understand that stuff can happen, but I'm not seeing how it adds up, especially if we're gonna do either of the options and we're talking about a possible 20% increase, and that pushes Marin farther back, and how much money is gonna be left over for Marin. So that's just my comment.
May I make a suggestion? My greatest fear is that we make a hybrid and it doesn't work well for anything. If we're going to consider retrofitting any part of this building, I would like to give that task to my staff to understand what part of that building is best used if we do keep it. I think, even though I dislike what I'm going to say, I think the best building to keep, if we had to keep anything, is the one we're sitting in. The classrooms are not functional. We make the best with what we have. Keeping a section of the school that makes our current classrooms look pretty, have better lights, and maybe better sound, still makes a classroom that's not functional for the kind of education we're asking our kids to be expected to learn. The current multipurpose room we wanted to change it out with a new one, partially because we need to be able to also, with that plan, we wanted to address the students moving in back and forth. We wanted to address the age of the floor, the beam that was rotted that had to be exchanged. But if you kept this building and those two classrooms next door, those rooms could be opened up and offer some space for perhaps a district office utilage. But allow the school to be rebuilt, given the things that these folks have mentioned, allows my staff to be part of taking into account the costs that we would be asked to stay within, and work with the architect to come up with something that adjusts from what we had as our ideal school. But the idea of keeping the front part of the school and building on top of current classrooms, that would be one of, I think, our greatest nightmares as a staff.
Charlie, I'm going to jump in here just for a second. Do we have any estimates for what renovation just of the multipurpose room, just of this building would cost, as opposed to replacing it? I mean, is there a significant savings there? If we're going to save $20,000, there's no point in doing it. If we're going to save $2 million, there is. So that would be important to me to know. Charlie?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I don't know if Juan, you might, or anybody else who has.
I'd have to look at that, Paul, and give you a number with some reasoning behind it, but I think it could be significant in the $1 million to $2 million range of savings. You may end up with a building that doesn't look much different than this, but might have new finishes. So it may not be the ideal multi-purpose building going forward, but that's a study I can do fairly quickly.
Great, thanks.
President Black, I'm sorry, do you mind before you move on to Charlie? I'm not so sure that your original question got answered, so I just want to clarify. You had asked, or somebody had asked, can a school be rebuilt within the 41 million? Is that a reasonable amount? And I'm not quite sure.
I think we did get an answer.
Did we, did we say yes? It was yes. Okay, thank you.
Charlie and then Jacob.
So I just wanted to follow up with Terry. You know, the existing multi-purpose room is physically located very close to where this new one is. It's about 100 feet southwest, basically. Is there any way, given the existing site, that you could move the playground to where the playground is shown on this plan if you kept the existing multi-purpose room?
If my memory serves me, when we worked with the architects around this, part of the reason the multipurpose room is kind of at an angle there is it allowed for that additional parking. So by keeping the multipurpose room here, with that plan, we would have to rethink the parking component. And moving the playground is exactly what we wanted to do. I don't know how much of the playground that this plan asks for sits where the current multipurpose room is. So we may lose a portion of that playground because it's really only 2 basketball courts back there, size of 2 basketball courts, and that's not large enough in itself for a playground.
There's also the area where the existing portable, which is not shown on this plan, of course, has been dropped down. The one that's kind of like a notch in the corner, right up, go up a little, right there. I mean, you know, you've got that area as well if the portable's not there. If that's something you'd be willing to look at, it would help me, and I just should just...
Yeah, I think if it allows us to really take a look at rebuilding what's most important is our classrooms, our library, and kind of the concept of flow of our school, then I think that would be a project we'd be eager to work on.
Yeah. So, and I should just disclose that in my working life, what I do is I work on air pollution studies, and so I'm very aware of the impact of roadways on air pollution levels. Living next to a freeway is not a good place to live. Buchanan Street, it's Buchanan Street here, is also not a freeway, but there are 30,000 vehicles a day going by, and it's not a great place for a playground. And I'm not convinced it's a great place for a classroom building. I'm just hesitant about that, and I'm well aware of many air pollution studies which show the effects of roadways, and so I'd love to look at that a little bit more. What I really like about the idea of moving the playground is it gets it away from the roadways.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah, I'll save it for later. I'll save the comment for later and give other people a chance.
Can I just, one more thing about the cost. This has been a 5-year process. Obviously, it's been a long, long time. Each year that this goes by then is going to be another almost $2 million. So I think one of the things to consider is that a lot of people have moved along on this process for a long, long time, and that one of the ways we can save the most money is to make those decisions as quickly as we can.
Thanks. Okay.
I'd like to make one more comment on the cost. So is the process going to be design build? Have you decided that, or is that somebody just threw out there?
That has not been decided.
It's not decided. Okay. I mean,
It's most likely it would be, though. Yeah.
Okay, so And then, so these are the bridging docks?
Can you talk a little more into the mic? We can't hear you.
Okay, so would these be the bridging docks?
I don't know.
Okay, so these are, actually, the documents that you were looking at for the ones that are shown on the screen are the bridging docks for the design build team to design and give a GMP. Trying to keep this thing going here. So I think everybody, and I'm here just to, I've been asked here just to, this is just my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. But I started working for an architect a long time ago, and with schools, it was always function, cost, design. So everything, function, and put that in priority. Function, cost, design. You can have this way it's done. You can have a bridging docks, or they're done. You can have the design build team put a number out to see where you're at before you do anything. And so so you don't have to go around and around and go like what ifs. There's a lot of what ifs, and you know what? We all don't know what the future has right now with what ifs. I know it's safer to tear down the buildings, but you've got bridging docks almost done here, so I don't know. You would be able to put it out on the street a lot sooner. Would probably be better.
Yeah, good. Kim?
Thank you. So building on that, as well as what Stephen Nave just said, to me, maybe I'm being precipitate, but we've heard from a number of people already, and what you said, Terry. I feel like we need to go forward. I mean, Terry has said that she might want to reconsider the parking a bit because of the changes at UC Village, because now the need for parking on this campus is even higher than it was before. You've got to find places for your teachers to park, and we have this escalation in cost happening. You have said that if we kept anything, could possibly be the building that we're in, which in the two plans, the new plan and the current site, the NPR is pretty close to the same place, and this one is a little bit bigger. But what you would really like is the chance to get better classrooms for the students, and I think the students deserve those better classrooms. And you said that, in terms of your staff, you think that their greatest nightmare would be having a second story put on top of classrooms that are pretty inadequate as it is, sort of compounds the problem there. So, I think that we should move forward with the plan of we're going to rebuild and possibly renovate Ocean View, maybe a choice building, maybe this building, maybe there's some other tiny bit that can be saved, but to me that's that I think is the plan with the most wisdom going forward.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, Kevin, and then I wonder if we can take some questions and comments from the audience.
Thanks. I remember the multipurpose room was a big, excuse me, a big discussion point. One thing we were especially intrigued about was its potential as a revenue generator. I think the way we designed it, it would actually end right about where we are here, and it would there would be an access point, so people could be, if there was a big gathering or we rented it out to someone, they could have live music here, and it would open up out that way. So, I'm all for choosing what to keep and what to leave off the menu, so to speak, when we're building the school. But if it's at all possible to design in such a way that we might generate revenue down the road, I think that would be worth looking at. Thanks.
Thanks. Do we have people in the audience who want to? You need to come up to the microphone over here so people can hear you.
Good evening. My name is Madison Lee. I'm a community member, a parent, and I'm also an architect in the area. A couple of things I wanted to ask the design team.
That mic will come off the stand, I think,
does
if
it?
it's easier to.
Thanks. Have we ever considered portables as an option? Because I know that I've actually worked on public schools and worked at DSA, and one of the things that we've found that helps save costs is looking at portable as an option for construction. That's one question. Another question, or actually more of a comment, is I think design build is actually the really best way to go. In my experience with public schools and just public projects, you get the best benefit by going design build because you get a contractor on board early, you get a design team on early that can give you the best solution moving forward. That's just sort of what my experience has been. I do want to point out that I'm currently working on a community college project, and we've gone through several iterations of financial issues, and one of those being we're renovating 2 existing buildings, and we sent it out to market. And the problem that we are facing with renovation work is that a lot of the bids come back 2x, and that's not something that we expected. Partly that's one due to the current market, but also when you're working with renovation, there's just so many unforeseen conditions that you cannot anticipate, and the cost of fixing one thing just becomes this sort of like spiraling effect. And so that's just something to really keep in mind, because what you may anticipate, as part of the scope of work ends up being 4 times that amount of effort and cost and time down the road. So it's a real concern, it's a real issue. I'm facing it currently with the projects I'm working on. Again, the budget came back 2x. The duration was, 1.5 of that, and it's a really small project. So those are my comments and questions.
Thanks. Others? Oh, well, come on up.
Hi, can you guys hear me? My name is Payal Sampath. I've been an Albany resident since 2011 and an AUSD parent since then as well. I have a child here in Ocean View in 2nd grade and another in the middle school who went K through 5th grade here. And I think there are 3 issues I'd like to mention. Accountability, safety, and equity, 3 important issues as a parent and as an Albany voter. I voted to rebuild. That was, the language of the measure, and that has been our understanding since the time of the measure passing. Looking at these plans, this just seems to make so much more sense for many of the reasons that Ms. Jordison mentioned. Currently, we have a school with insufficient facilities for children. I have a child who comes back from school saying she couldn't use the bathroom. It was hard to get time in the bathroom, spot in the bathroom. We have leaking roofs. We have multiple entrances from a safety perspective. This is a real concern. I've seen people just walking through the school at different times of day and very little ability to monitor those spaces. Ocean View was never built to be an elementary school. To whoever it was who said that there were people who planned the school, it was not built to be an elementary school. It was repurposed as an elementary school. And as we all know, there's significant seismic issues that need to be dealt with. Between Marin and Ocean View, this is the school with the greater seismic susceptibility and instability. We have a natural gas pipeline running right by as well. So, from an equity perspective, I would say it's unacceptable to think of rebuilding one school without thinking about those same considerations for the other. This is the school with the highest percentage of Title I students, the largest number of minority students. This is the school where a lot of the spillover comes. We have a lot of needs and lots of flexibility. Students from the village coming in, students from the village withdrawing because UC Berkeley changes its mind. These inequities, these systemic inequities, are things that the school district should be trying to remedy and not perpetuate. And so As a parent, I'm speaking out, and my child is probably not even going, none of my children are probably going to benefit from this. I just think this is something that the school district needs to consider, the school board needs to consider, and I'm very much in support of the rebuild. Thank you.
Thanks. I just want to comment real quickly. When we're talking about equity, let's not lose track of the fact that there's been no talk at all about Cornell. And I would love for there to be some money left over to do some renovations at Cornell. The school building is sound, it's safe, but it's a very tired school. And it would be great if we didn't spend all our money on these two schools and we had some money for Cornell.
Yes, of course, and I'm ready and willing to help with that when we get there, because it is a school that I think as the principal of Cornell, when we get to the place where we have two schools that may be completely renovated and likely have a number of new and updated items for teaching and learning, Cornell will be sorely behind in that area, regardless of having a new building. So I look forward to that opportunity as well. Thank you.
Thanks. If it's easier, you can pull the mic out of this stand.
Do it that way. Good evening, board and group. Brian Parsley, Albany resident. Other than Terry, I probably, and maybe Karen, I'm probably one of the people here that's better knows the school, as I went to middle school here. I've also worked close by for the past 12 years, mostly dealing with a lot of the parking issues, which I was exceedingly happy to see the layout of the parking lot. And I don't think that can be discounted. The reason I say that is because there was something that came up where the parking in front of Ocean View, sometimes people from the village are parking in front of Ocean View. The parking in front of Ocean View, that being the parking on the east side of Jackson, belongs to the University of California. It does not belong to the Albany Unified School District. It belongs to the University of California, much like the roadway. There is no guarantee that parking will ever stay that way. In light of Chancellor Christ's statement this week that not only People's Park, but all 9 sites will now have housing, which means more housing will be coming to the village within the next decade. So I think that's a reality that the district also needs to look at. The bigger issue, I believe, is that, and some members of the board and some members of the group here supported Measure B&E. And I believe, if I have it here, B&E, one of the main things it says was to rebuild Marin and Ocean View schools with seismically safe facilities to support modern learning standards and subjects like science, engineering, math, and humanities. I'm not sure you can do that with a retrofit. I think we've heard that tonight. So you either misled the public or I don't know. Is this the typical bait and switch that we have? Maybe this meeting should have happened before the campaign. So we would have had an idea of what we were doing before we taxed ourselves into oblivion. We're 5 years in now, and this parcel tax or these bonds are going to go on and on and on, but we're still seeing nothing other than the middle school annex to begin construction. I think you owe it to this community to rebuild this school. This is not an elementary school. This is a middle school. It was never designed to be an elementary school. It was designed for 11, 12, and 13-year-olds. The classrooms are small, they're outdated. Same with Marin. Is it going to cost money? Yes, it is. Is money a factor? Yes, it is. But that's what you promise this community. And if you don't, I'm telling you, I will lead the charge the next time you come out for a parcel tax against it. Thank you.
Just Charlie, just a second. I just want to point out, because I was on the board when we put B&E on the ballot, and there was a considerable discussion as to whether we would be allowed to replace the schools entirely if the wording was rebuild, because the assumption was that rebuild meant renovate and leave in place. So you could interpret it either way, and the wording of the bonds, I think, just says do the best we can with the money we have. Charlie?
So I would like to speak to that too. And I am concerned because it's clear that everybody has a different understanding of what the word rebuild means. But excuse me, please let me finish. I would ask people to please go to the record of multiple school board meetings that occurred throughout 2015 and 2016. Please listen to the videos. Please listen to the bond attorney assure the board that the word rebuild could include everything from complete replacement to complete retrofit. Please listen to all the discussions in which the board said, okay, we don't have to commit to either a retrofit or a replacement at this time. We can put out the bond measure and we will use the words rebuild. We had those discussions. They were public meetings. Everybody was welcome to attend them, to speak to them. That discussion is available through the video archives. So basically what I'm hearing is people are saying, oh, we thought you meant replace, when actually there was a long public discussion in which it was clear that there was no commitment to either one. So I think what we're trying to do tonight is let's get past this kind of sense that, oh, you said X and it's a bait and switch. It really wasn't. It was fully aired in public. It was said in public that there was no particular commitment to either retrofit or replacement. What we're trying to do tonight is come together around what is the best for the students moving forward. And so that's what I want to hear about. I want to hear people talk about what gets us the best possible classroom spaces for students, and I am concerned about the constraints on budget, and I hope we'll get to that.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Does it work? Yeah, okay, great. I'm Catherine Lanowet, and I'm a kindergarten parent, so I'm new to the scene, and I live in UC Village, and I first wanted to just thank everyone for their thoughtfulness of the decisions, and also coming from New York City, you have so much space. I just want to talk about that. So just the ability to reimagine this space. My background is a classroom teacher, and I'm now working on my PhD specifically in elementary school learning and young children. And I just wanted to urge the group specifically, as someone who spends a lot of time on learning theory, there's a lot of research on the physical structure in which teachers are asked to teach and to engage children, specifically around STEM learning, which is my area of focus, has a huge impact on learning. It's often been called the third teacher. So what I've been really impressed with this design here is the thought from the community and the teachers who are day-to-day teaching, and the emphasis on practice, the actual classroom instruction, and that just seems so impressive to me with the design that's been put forward through a community process. So I would just like to just continue to emphasize it's easy when we don't see the kids running through here and think of the hard teachers' work each day, but that should be a priority, learning and learning theories which specifically speak to built design, specifically young children. It seems like you have a lot of great resources to move in that direction. So I just wanted to put that back in, which often gets forgotten with numbers. Thank you.
A couple of comments to comment on what we've heard from the last several speakers. Number of people have noted that this school was originally built as middle school, and I think we should really try to keep that in mind as a lesson from the past going forward. We have a high school, a middle school, a children's center up on Jackson that has its own issues and problems. We have 3 elementary schools, but we have a future that could include expanded nursery school and TK. we could absolutely make decisions to accommodate things based on changes or based on architecture. So for example, we could absolutely build a K-3 school at Marin, move all of K-3 or all of K-2 or all of K-1 to a single site built as a school site for younger grades. In my imagining of using some of this site going forward, I really would love to stick a district office here where you're not worried about L-shaped rooms. And so you could possibly make on this site a mix of things and accommodate elsewhere in the district things that desperately need a kindergarten-sized large room. On the timing issue, there's discussion about, well, the longer we delay, the more it'll cost. We absolutely have to recognize that we're paced by the annexes at the middle school and the high school unless we're prepared to rent spaces somewhere or stick portables everywhere. We bought into the idea that when those annexes are done, we can we can break ground. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be then ready to break ground if that's the plan. But if those go delayed, then we may have bought an extra year and an extra year of cost, et cetera. It really worries me. It gets me back to the money issue. As a board member and as a school parent, I'd feel much more comfortable if I could see these numbers much more tangibly and clearly. They're very fuzzy here, but why not, kind of like the school care thermometer, right? Let's put up a money is available for construction and put on that already the AMS costs and put on there the AHS future costs and put on there the estimate for Ocean View, so that if, as I'm fearing, the numbers there go a little bigger, you start looking at Marin as the place you'll only be able to do a seismic retrofit because we'll have run out of money. And I'd have to say, having seen these numbers, more of these numbers before Alan left than we're seeing in the presentation tonight, they worry me a bit. When Alan was saying things like, well, we could remove some monies from the AMS annex, we could maybe pare it back a little more during construction or not outfit it entirely to save enough monies for the others. He also talked about the idea that we could, in the process of rebuilding Ocean View, pare that back because we were anticipating not enough money for Marin. We're skating too close to the edge, I think. And I'd really love to see a better visualization to understand where that edge is and how close we are.
Oh, wait, Paul? Sorry to make you wait, just another moment. Okay, a couple of comments. It came up from one of the speakers about the process that we've been through so far, and I just wanted to clarify that before the bond measure went onto the ballot, there was a facilities master planning process that took place over a period of years, and that idea was to look at all of the buildings, all of the sites in the district, and to look at them in terms of best use and what they were suited for. The facilities master planning process came up with a price tag overall of $137 million to do what we wanted to do. And it was impossible to go out to the voters for that much money. And so the list of projects was pared down to what we thought could be done. And so there's been a lot of thought put into this process already, and that's where we stand. We don't need to repeat that process again because it's been done. Ross just mentioned build a K-3 at Marin, but there was a configuration committee that was assembled that had educators from primary and secondary and community members and teachers. And we did research and we discussed the possibility of having more grade-specific campuses. And the configuration committee came to the decision that it was best for Albany to stick with 3 elementary schools.
Kim, when was there a configuration committee?
Under Marla, I was on it, and also, I think that Terry and Heather were on it also.
So 4 or 5 years ago, at least.
4 years ago. So, okay, and then the board did go out for the bond, and that passed in June 2016. And I was actually really amazed at how quickly the design build process worked, because we broke ground on the middle school annex in November 2017. So, and now we're preparing to do construction at the high school beginning this summer. So this has been like lightning. As soon as the district got the funding, we've moved ahead quickly on 2 projects, although I would say that we've moved forward quickly and very thoughtfully, because we've involved the teachers and the community in both of these processes. And I'm sure that we will do we've already started that process with the design team that met here, and we will continue with that as we move forward with Ocean View. Oh, and lastly, I think that the guaranteed maximum price process that we've used for both of the projects and the design build process that involves is a way that we can best try to cover ourselves against the escalation of these costs. When you sign that contract for a guaranteed maximum price, your construction team is locked in. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Yee. I'm a parent of a 3rd grader here at Ocean View. The main point I wanted to raise actually is simply to note how alarming and easy it is to think of this as a process that pits one school against another or a group of parents against another. And I do feel that Albany is incredibly fortunate in having a very small school district. We do not have to worry about school buses. We are tiny. And what benefits one of our elementaries benefits all of our elementaries, because they all gather in the middle school. They all gather in the high school. The classmates you have with you, if they're better students, you become a better student, and it helps your teachers as well. And I don't mean to sound a Pollyanna. I'm a civil rights attorney. I'm not Pollyanna by nature. Trust me. But it is true that I just think that it's very easy to lose sight of this and to think about, well, what benefits one school will be taken away from the mouths of the children in another school. And I think that that is a very zero-sum game and is unnecessary in this district in particular. And I just want to keep on raising that. I also think that the people of Albany in our bond measures and in our approaches, yes, my husband and I struggled when we were thinking of the property taxes. That's a hit. That's a hit for all of us. But there's also been a lot of generosity about recognizing, well, the children are important. The children are our future. We want that education. We're going to take that hit. So no, I don't think it's like, let's all be fuzzy about the numbers, let's just trust that things will work out. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I do think that you can rely on the people of Albany supporting the children of Albany and all of our schools and I do think my one question then is how a budget naturally divides people, because you're talking about limited resources. So how is it that as a school board and as parents and as a community, we can minimize that kind of divisiveness and really try to think about what's best for all our children and all our schools? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Karen Lamb. I don't really think I need a microphone. I'm really good at speaking loudly, so let's just avoid the technology.
It's being recorded.
Okay. So my name is Karen Lamb, and I am an Albany resident for 51 years. That's how long I've been on this planet, and that's how long I've lived in Albany. I graduated from Albany High School. This was my middle school. That's my locker room over there that Mr. Corcoran teaches in. And I have 3 older sons who went through here. I was a parent here from 1999 to 2009, and I'm once again back with my 6.5-year-old. I want to urge you to take a long view. I want you to not look at what you're looking at for cost, except as you have to. I want you to look at what we're giving our children. When people say this school is unsafe, they're right. My son sustained a serious eye injury in a classroom that was not made to support a first grade class, but became a first grade class because the school board and the administration did not take a long view of what needed to happen for enrollment for this school year. Don't let that happen with school construction. I was one of the first classes that went to Marin School when it was rebuilt. I was one of the first classes that came here as a middle school. My son was one of the first classes that came here when it was repurposed as an elementary school. And the questions that we're raising now are the same questions we raised when he came here. He is 25, he's a college graduate. He benefited from the fantastic education that he received here. I'm the first to admit that. But this school was not created for kids in this age group, and it needs to be created again. We need to start over. I do want to speak, lastly, I'm going to keep this short because I got to get out of here, but when I voted for Measure B, I read everything that was available in the voter documents. I did not watch all the discussion and debate of school board meetings. If this is an example of what happens here, all of the names are facing away from the people who are sitting in your audience. We don't necessarily know who you are from your faces when you're talking. We don't know who you are when you speak out without us hearing your names and knowing who we're talking to. So no, I didn't watch every one of those videos of those school board meetings, and what I'm looking at on the web and what I read in Measure B today absolutely says these two schools will be rebuilt. Here's a website from the League of Women Voters, if anyone would like to pass around my phone. It very clearly says, rebuild Marin and Ocean View elementary schools with seismically safe school facilities to support modern learning standards in subjects like science, engineering, math, and humanities. That's what I voted for. That's what everyone I know voted for. That's what Brian Parsley voted for. That's what the teachers who live in Albany, very few of them because of our economics, but that's what we voted for. We didn't vote for a Band-Aid. We voted for a cure for the ill that's underneath that Band-Aid. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Zalev. I have 2 children at Ocean View, and I want to encourage you to go forward with what we thought was the plan all along and what was presented in Measures B and E, which was that we were going to rebuild a new Ocean View and a new Marin. It seems like all of a sudden at the 11th hour, somebody's been like, hey, let's not give Ocean View a whole new school. But I don't hear similar talks about Marin, and I feel bad kind of saying this after what Sylvia said about Unity. But how come we're only talking about scaling back Ocean View and there's been no mention of scaling back Marin? Can anybody answer that?
Sure. I think it very may well be that if we build the Ocean View that the previous design team had laid out, our option for Marin will be to put in portables on blacktop, which might not be a bad idea given what we've heard about portables. I think the problem is we're going to have X amount left in bond dollars, and building both schools as we'd like to see them will be X plus something. I mean, I think I flat out heard that from Alan before he left. He basically said, well, if we cut back the middle school, we cut back the high school annex a bit, if we get the state monies we're hoping we're getting, and if we don't build a district office, then we can probably build these things. Well, that worries me a lot. And so, Stephen, if we don't build a district office, if we think of the kids first, we rent a district office. We spend out of the general fund enough money for a couple of teachers every year because we're renting someone else's space. You know, the district office exists. The people in it, the staff, sit somewhere. If we don't build one, we rent one. If we rent one, it comes out of the general fund. There's X amount of money. And I worry, that's why, you know, I'm thinking about Marin and Ocean View and everything else. I'm thinking we got a 300-seat auditorium at the high school, the little theater. There ain't no big one. I'd love to build something there. It's next on the master plan coming after all this, and it'll never be gotten to. So I think the board is weighing a lot of equities, a lot of issues, and not trying to pit one against another. I'm worried that if we get a very nice school here, we won't get one at Marin. If we build a great school at Marin, we may not get a full one here. I'd like to balance everything we can.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So where's the balance? Is Marin also going to get scaled back or just Ocean View?
I'd like to address the seismic issues, absolutely, because I'd like not to be at risk of losing buildings. My kids went through Marin. I volunteered as a parent in Marin. I don't mind it so much. I understand why people think the rooms are small and cramped and all that. After addressing seismic, and not because they're going to fall down and hurt people, because that's what the seismic reports didn't say. They said, no, you know, we may lose the buildings, we may have to replace them. Well, if y'all watch the videos, I've been the board member who's been most reluctant to spend any monies knocking things down because we're paying an awful lot of money for things. I'd rather been focusing on in the classrooms that we have, you know, and teachers and other resources than physical plant. You know, this is a very nice, solid building. I'd love to think that this could be like my elementary school. It's 100 years old. It's not in an earthquake zone, granted, but the school is much more the people in the rooms and the ideas they bring in with them than the walls, and I'd like to maximize that.
So I just was going to share that I had the interesting experience last night of sitting in the Scottish Rite Temple in downtown Oakland when the earthquake hit. Having started the meeting there thinking, boy, I sure wouldn't like to be here in an earthquake. So I am very mindful that we need to be thinking about the seismic safety of these buildings. And the best thing for us to do is to just keep that foremost in our minds, that we're thinking about buildings that are safe buildings, we're thinking about buildings that are functional buildings, as somebody said. Certainly what entered into the board discussion a year ago when it came to Marin was the observation that 1/3 of the classrooms at Marin are portables, and some of those are very old portables. It's a very different campus. This building, for all the difficulties of adapting to a middle school, is a much different facility than the Marin facility is. So, you know, I don't know what we'll do at Marin eventually, because we haven't drilled down to that level. There's nothing on the table in terms of what that should look like. I guess there is a plan. It's a plan that has been more or less put on the shelf, and we're going to have to come back to it. You know, I think I just wanted to get back to the question of budget, because I think we do know what the budget is. We have $95 million to work with. We have committed $23.5 million to the middle school and high school projects. That leaves $71.5 million. And basically what we said in the bond measure is that we would rebuild Marin and Ocean View schools. Now, I know we're all still arguing a little bit about what that means, but I think we all want the same thing in the end. What we want are good, modern, safe schools. You know, so I think that's really the goal, and we have to figure out how to get there within the budget constraints that we have. So basically, we have $71.5 million, 2 schools to build. Plus, if I read the bond measure again, I'm reminded that we also need to save sufficient money for district-wide technology, equipment, and furnishings. So we have something less than $71.5 million for the 2 schools, and we just have to figure out the best way to get there.
Okay, I think we have several people who want to speak. Jacob, I think, Kim, did you have your hand up too? And then Howard did, and then I want to make a comment too. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, I just want to make an observation. I don't remember anybody up here on the board pitting one school against the other, and I also am not quite sure what was meant by the statement that if we're trying to stay within budget, somehow it's described as being divisive. These are some serious decisions we're making, and it seems like some people really want to move forward, and I understand that. But characterize from what I've observed tonight, I haven't heard anybody pit one school against the other. And as far as divisive, we're just trying to do what's right and stay within budget, or at least me, myself. So I didn't appreciate that comment about, I don't know who's pitting who against each other.
Thanks, Kim.
I just wanted to point out that some of the numbers that Charlie was just talking about, they're on page 4 of the board packet, so they're available for everybody to look at. And down about the middle of the page, it has bond funds remaining after the AMS and AHS projects. So the bond funds remaining, $71.5 million, and then if you go down a bit further, you can see the open bullet. Ocean View is budgeted for $39.5 million from B&E plus $2 million from the state, and Marin has been budgeted for $32 million from B&E plus $1 million from the state. And I just wanted to point out that there's an essential difference between Ocean View and Marin. The Ocean View site is bigger. We have more acreage here. This is always going to be our biggest school, especially given the concerns that Ross brought up about possibly having to house more students as the Bay Area gets more densely populated, and some of our apartment buildings and houses are built up or built more densely, and depending on what UC Village does, and the possibility of having to bring kids in for preschool and universal TK. So Ocean View has a bigger budget because it's going to be a bigger school, and Marin has a very small acreage footprint, and that's, I think, going to be a small school. It doesn't have. It can go to second story, but it certainly doesn't have the possibility that this site does. So there's going to be differences between our elementary schools all the time going forward. But the education there for the students is going to be an equitable experience.
Howard.
Okay. On the subject of cost, and I don't know what the inflation rate is going to be in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, and whether it's going to be 3% or 5%, but I do know that if we construct the project delivery the way that we did at the middle school project, then what we're going to do is send out a request for proposals, and we're going to give the qualified teams a budget to work within. And if they can build this project for whatever amount we tell them, $38 million, then that's what they're going to have to do. If they don't think they can do it, they're going to have to get creative, and they're going to have to tell us, well, maybe we will keep this building, and if we keep this building, maybe the what is that called? The after school building may not get built. Maybe the portables that already exist will be the after-school program, and maybe they'll really get creative and figure out another place for them to be in the city of Albany. If we construct the request for proposal sufficiently, and this is a question for Juan, I guess, to let the proposer, those that are proposing the for us in response to the RFP, that we're interested in your creative ideas to save money, and if our limit's $38 million, if you can show us how to build something for $35 million, we'll listen.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just add a little bit onto that because that's pretty much the point I was going to make. We've had some terms thrown around here tonight that I think most of the people around the tables here know, but many of the people in the audience may not. That's design build and guaranteed maximum price. And that's what Howard was talking about. The traditional way of building a building was called design bid build. And if you've ever built a house or an addition on your house, it's probably how you did it. You have an architect design it. And they design what you want, and everybody's happy. Then you get construction companies to bid on it. And they're going for the lowest bid because they're not going to get the job unless they give you the lowest bid. And then when you've hired them, then they tell you what they can actually build. And then you have fights with them, and you never talk to them again after the project's over. And if anything goes wrong, the architect is suing the construction company, and everybody's suing everybody. The design build process brings in a team which includes the architect and the builder. and they're giving you a bid, and you give them a bridging document. So this would be the bridging document. It would say, functionally, this is what the school needs to be. Then they look at it and they say, because it's both the architect and the builder, they say, what can we build that will give you that function at the price that you have given us? So they won't give you that school. They'll give you a school that's probably better, but one that they know they can build at that price because they have no one else to turn to or blame if they can't. Because it's both the architect and the construction company together giving this bid. And at the end, you get something built in budget that fills the function that you require, but they might and certainly will come up with ways to save money in the process and probably improvements to the design.
And then at the end, when you've chosen who you think you would like to work with as the successful bidder on the design-build basis, you may get a menu of things that can be either deducted or added, and you sit down and you make your best judgment as to what you can afford and what you'd like to have, and you arrive at your final price at that point.
Exactly. So as I said earlier, what I'm hoping to get at tonight, and I think we have heard some support for this, it might not be universal. These would pretty much be our bridging documents, but we'd be willing, if it saved a significant amount of money, to save this building. We might be willing to save another building if it didn't get in the way of the function of the school and could be used for the district office. And these are the kinds of ideas we'd want the design-build people to be coming to us with. If we could agree on that scenario or some other scenario before we leave here tonight, I think we'll have done what we need to do. And I'm sorry, you've been waiting there a long time to finish your comments.
Yeah, I kind of forgot what my follow-up question was after that. Can I come back if I think of it?
So to comment, before other folks comment, to comment on someone's comment about structure and format and all that, for all the regular board meetings, we're up on the dais facing the public, and you all are free to sort of see our faces as you yell at us. The nature, and we have to talk to the mic, and the nature of this meeting is unfortunately that we're sort of structured facing the screen. But I absolutely welcome you all to come to regular board meetings and watch us on video if not. It's, you know, in the 3.5 years I've been here, I've actually really enjoyed every board meeting, even the most contentious ones, even the ones last year around the Instagram affair, for being able to interact with folks. I actually would love to get more emails from people than I do. But I think all of the board is happy to sit and face you all and talk. And please come to the regular meetings.
Can I give a quick comment to just, oh, sorry. Thanks. Just to respond to your question about whether or not rebuilding versus remodeling, retrofitting at Marin was on the table. And I just want to speak, I can understand why you'd have that question, but I also want to speak a little bit to process, and the process that maybe not everybody in this room is aware of. There was a facilities steering committee that convened regularly this year to take a look at which schools should be built first. And I think going back to what Kim was talking about in terms of Ocean View being a bigger project, that was something that we talked about a lot. And therefore, because it was a bigger project, it came with a bigger cost. And we're all worried about cost, and we're all worried about getting every kid what they need in Albany, absolutely. And because I think for me, that at the end of the day, and I think for a lot of people who sat on that committee, if Ocean View didn't go first, because of rising cost escalation and that 5 to 8% that compounds, we were seriously putting several kids at several buildings in Albany at risk, and it wouldn't be the right decision. And so that's one of the many reasons that we discussed at length in terms of, agreeing to or proposing to the board to start with Ocean View. I think that part of the reason why we're not addressing specifics at Marin right now is because Marin's not on the table. Marin is, we're going after Ocean View is complete, and that's been clearly delineated by the board. And when it is our turn to go next, assuming that we're all going to proceed to make and I believe we will, to make the best choices for all students in Albany, we'll lean into the hard conversations too and take a look at our budget and take a look at costs and see what's needed to be and the best that can be done. But that's why, to address your question of why we're not talking about the differences with Marin. So I hope that helps.
Right. So I'm a structural engineer, and I've spent a lot of time doing a lot of different school projects from a sub-consultant perspective. And from that perspective, there's times when we'll do a seismic retrofit and the priority is a seismic retrofit. There's times when the priority is IT upgrades. There's times when it's HVAC upgrades. There's times when it's building new classrooms, retrofitting other classrooms. And I think just to sort of summarize a lot of what I've been hearing for the last several hours, design professionals are a fairly creative bunch. It's why we got into what we do. We can give the client, the school, a number of things if we know what those priorities are. And I think what's very helpful is how can you, the community, you, the owners, prioritize what's most important for that money. The budget is never going to be enough. I mean, I'm adding on to my house right now. We don't have enough money to pay for what we want. It's just never the case. But if we know what those priorities are, we can, through things like the design build process and a guaranteed max price, figure out creative ways to hit those priorities. And I think what is very helpful as a member of the design community is to hear what is most important then. I mean, if it's seismic retrofit, looking at the budget numbers here, the budget numbers for the seismic retrofit are $4.8 million out of a $41 million budget. It's like a seventh of the cost. We can seismically retrofit everything in the district and have money left over. We could do IT upgrades and bring internet and technology into the classrooms and have money left over, but it's not going to solve the classroom size and configuration kinds of problems. We can solve the classroom size and configuration problems and rebuild a new school, and that's going to use the budget in a different way. So I think any sort of specificity and documentation that can move forward to provide recommendations on those priorities to the design teams moving forward is going to be in the interest of the school district, the community, and the students ultimately, because then we can help give you what you want.
Hello, my name is Matt Irwin, the parent of 3 kids here in Albany. Unfortunately, none of them are going to be able to take advantage of the new schools at Ocean View or at Marin when we get those done. But I think we've heard something said a lot of different ways, that we want what's best for the kids here in the school district, and also that the voters voted for $90-something million to do a rebuild, which means demolish and replace for Ocean View and for Marin. We have $41.5 million in the budget for Ocean View. We have $33 million in the budget for Marin. And we've also heard that the longer we push it out, costs escalate. So I think what I would like to ask the board is that we move quickly, do a guaranteed maximum price, design build. I think that makes sense. That will minimize the amount of change orders or potentially additional costs that might creep up throughout the project. And if we hear back that, hey, we can't do Ocean View for 41.5, then we reevaluate. But I think pausing now and stretching out the process is not what majority of the residents in Albany want, and could only have negative impact on the financials. And one other thing that I want to bring up is one of my sons took swim lessons at the old pool, when we first moved to Albany. And I think a great decision back then was not to try and retrofit and patch the old aquatic center. It was a lot of money. I voted for it. I think it was around 20 million. I don't remember for sure, but it was a significant expansion in the capabilities of the aquatic center. We went from 1 pool to 2 pools, and it was great for the community. So I think that's what the residents of Albany want is to invest in the facilities, and doing a some kind of retrofit and remodel approach as opposed to a tear down and rebuild is not what we want for Ocean View. It's not what we want for Marin. And the money's, we have the money allocated. Let's try and spend it as quick as we can.
So President Black, we have about 15 minutes left on our agenda, and a question I had for the board is, what next steps would you like either staff to do or next steps in the process?
Okay, well, I'd like to try something, and if it fails, then we might have to table this and bring it back. But I've heard very clearly from the public and from most of the people at the table that certainly for the classrooms, they would like to see it tear down and rebuild for a variety of reasons. I think, but I'm not sure, that the budget would allow for that. I'm willing, and it sounded like the principal of Ocean View is willing, to consider a retrofit for the multipurpose room if that saves a significant amount of money and will make a difference in the overall project. I think that we'd essentially have the bridging documents here, but we'd have to have our architects and engineers look at them and tell us whether they're complete enough, and if they're not, we'd need to push it a little bit farther. But I'd like to at least propose for the board's consideration that we take this as our decision tonight, that we go with the design build with the budget that we have, which is what, 41.5, something like that? And these as our bridging documents with the possibility of saving some money by retrofitting rather than rebuilding this building. I think that, if in fact when it goes out to build, none of the design build companies come back and say it can be done at that price, then we'll really need to reconsider. And see what they say they can build at that price. But since we have that budget, and it sounds like we could do it at that budget, that's my proposal. People want to comment on that? Kim?
I support that. I support that idea. That's the way I would like to move forward.
Ross?
I like that. I wish there were the additional allowance, and maybe this could be written into it, that if someone came back and said, well, actually, about half this campus is reusable, you could save $10 million to apply to elsewhere in the district, including to Marin or to Cornell. I don't know if that's doable in a charter to design build. If you can say, it's easy to say, 41.5 million, what's your best shot? I don't know if you can put in the option that says, and if you can come in at 30 and tell us why, great.
Well, actually, it is a competitive bid, so whoever comes in with the lowest bid gets an advantage over other bidders. Charlie?
So I think the question in my mind is whether there should be another step in which staff want to think about the question a little bit more. If you're ready for us to go out in the mode that's been suggested, I think I could do that. I have a concern about the dollar amount. I'll come back to that in a minute. But the other concern I had is whether staff would want time to process. I heard that suggestion earlier, thinking through what parts of the campus should be replaced, what parts could be preserved. Perhaps the Site Design Committee working with the Sustainability and Integrated Design Committee. Do you want that chance before it goes further?
Yeah, I'd like to see something come back where it's actually in writing that the guaranteed maximum price is $41.5 million, and something that's guaranteeing that the $2 million is coming from the state, and then I'd be more than happy to vote on it. But right now, it just doesn't seem concrete, and I haven't been in this process for 5 years like other people have been saying. I've been on the board for a year and a half, and not too long ago, we finally decided that we were going to do Ocean View first, and I thought that was a big step. Then all of a sudden, now we're like, tonight you need to vote and just move forward. So I'm not comfortable voting unless I get those two things I just requested.
Okay. Mahima, did you want to say anything?
Well, yes, I'd like to echo the sentiments that you guys have said. I think it's really important that we invest into Ocean View because in the long term, we want a school that's foundationally, great and also lasts. So I'm very much for minimal retrofitting, and I also think it, enables teachers and administration to shape the school in a way that's best fit for them. So I'm very much on board.
Okay, so I think, and let me try to formulate this again. I think I hear agreement that the board would like to move ahead, but we need a guarantee of the amount that we're going to spend. And this $2 million from the state is kind of assumed. That's kind of fuzzy. So on the other hand, we have $2 million that we're not spending on moving the kids. So maybe that just cancels out, and we can take the budget without that $2 million and see what we can get for it. If we got the $2 million from the state, we could spend it on renovating Cornell. So, whatever. But I agree with you, Jacob. That needs to be a firm number. So with that understanding, with the understanding that the board and public would like it to be a tear down and rebuild to the extent that it's affordable, and that's our understanding is the best for the kids, and that we think we have enough money to do that. Is that a clear enough direction for staff? We can ask staff. I see Ross wants to speak, and Charlie seems to think we need something more.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing to come along with that from staff, which would be a very clear timeline. Laid out something like a Gantt chart where we know, we've assumed that we can't do this without a place to put the kids. That depends on the AMS and AHS annexes. And we know that those will be finished at time X, optimistically, or later, pessimistically. So if we're going to, for example, break ground on here, it cannot be until we've moved the kids. So we have a date certain before which we can't do anything. And therefore, a window in which there's a bunch of things we can do to prepare to be able to break ground. It would be really great if those could be laid out as a chart of, we need to make a decision in this. We don't have to decide on an architect, et cetera, until point X. And after point X, we'll be delaying the project. Those sorts of laying out of all the issues, including getting things to the state architect for approval. Can't break ground until the state says we can. And it will be a lot clearer on folks as to the urgency of things. I hear people saying, we got to make a decision tonight. We don't have to make a decision tonight. We have to absolutely break ground, say, 2 years out. And that window, those windows should be very clear to everybody.
So I am definitely nervous counting on money from the state. I don't think we can count on it. And even if we do get it, it's probably going to be 5 years from now. So a future board will get to decide what to do with that $2 or $3 million in 5 years. I think we need to work with the Measure B and E money that we have some direct authority to allocate. So that means we have 71.5 million. I'm a little nervous allocating 41.5 million to this site, leaving only 30 million for the second project and all district-wide technology and equipment. So I'd like to scale back our budget cap a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sorry that Alan Gard isn't with us tonight, because I know that he had money set aside for the technology and equipment as a separate item, and I don't think this budget impinges on that. Do you?
I think it does.
Well, if it does, then that's definitely a problem. So, do you know, Val?
I don't know definitively. We could definitely find out, but I'm going to echo Jacob's concerns. I don't think we should count on the $2 million from the state, because everything that I have heard so far from Alan previously and also talking to Doug and following, I don't think we can count on that $2 million. So if we're going to, I agree, we need to get a guaranteed maximum price, but I don't think it's going to be the 41 million. I think it's going to be more in the line of about 39 point whatever million.
Right.
I don't
Okay,
feel comfortable.
I think that's fair. So I think that's part of it. We need to come back with what the guaranteed maximum price will be. And, right. And we need to know for sure whether these are the bridging documents or they're incomplete. But with that understanding, I think that it sounds to me like we're ready to move forward.
Well, I have one more question. You didn't say anything about the district office in your summary.
Oh, you're right, yes. And I would like that to be in the instructions to the design build team, that if they can come up with a way to save any of these buildings, add another floor to one of the buildings, whatever it would take within the budget to include some space for district office. And it doesn't have to be for the entire district office, because we have some of the district office can stay at Cornell. So, but that to be a contingency. When they do design, build, bid, there's a list of contingencies. We can add this on for X number of dollars. That could be in that category. So if it comes in within the budget, we could do it. Thanks for bringing that up.
The under number 2, I just want to make sure that clarity. There was a comment about staff work with the design team and the Sustainability Integrated Design Committee on what buildings could remain and be renovated.
That was a question on my part for staff. It was, do you want another opportunity before we go external with this to really work over the ideas?
Yeah, it sounded like Terry Georgeson was pretty sure, but that could, that we don't want to save any of these classroom buildings as classrooms.
Yeah, given the discussions around renovating or just doing seismic work, I mean, I think giving the staff an opportunity to come back together the way we did the first time. It'd be nice to know, as you guys have mentioned, what amount of money we're working with. First time this was designed, there was no talk of money per se. So having that in mind, I think we can tighten up our priorities. One of the things I wanted to take this opportunity to also mention is in talking about a timeline. One of the timelines that has worried me is if the middle school annex and the high school get built and we aren't ready to move in, what happens to those spaces?
Yeah, they sit empty.
Do those middle school and high school students move in?
No.
And then what happens when we are ready?
No,
Do they move back out?
That's
So that
right.
it's
Right.
that's where
No,
my
that's a good
fear
question.
sits, is
Yeah.
we need to be ready when they're ready.
Yeah, I agree. Ross?
A bunch of things that have been mentioned tonight remind me that we really need to work well, if only to be aware of what they might pull, with UC and UC Village. You know, I was quite surprised to find out I'll be paying for parking. They can be extremely capricious on what they choose to build or not, or the policies for admission of residents to the village. They want families, they don't want families. So I think we're being sort of buffeted by decisions they're making with insufficient heads up as to those. It'd be great to be in better communication with the UC Village and UC, maybe convince them that they have a certain obligation to let us be aware as their host community of how they're doing.
Okay, so I think we're ready to move forward. What we're really looking for is the bridging documents and the bid documents that will go out to the design bid companies. That includes all the components of what we've been talking about.
So I'm thinking, though, that if staff would like another go at this,
Yeah,
then the way to do that is to ask the site design committee to work with the bridging architect and with the sustainability and integrated design committee to come up with a final set of bridging documents that would maybe even have options so that you had your preferences about what buildings to keep and what buildings to replace reflected in the final set of bridging documents.
Right, and mindful that everybody's going to be running away in a few weeks, let's schedule that for as soon as we can. Who is the site design committee?
Well, I think the site design committee certainly included the principals, several teachers, and parents. It probably included a couple board members as liaisons, but I think they're different now.
No, it included me and it included Ron Rosenbaum. So
we asked Ron to come back. There you go.
Still here? Oh, he left, sorry. Yeah, well, we can reconstitute a site design committee pretty quickly. Well, I wasn't on the site design committee, so I don't know how complete these plans are. These might be the bridging documents. But the nature of the bridging document is that bridging documents they aren't the final architectural plan, but they include all of the functional elements and the priorities. So they would say, for example, a campus that can be closed, classrooms of a certain size, this many classrooms, that sort of thing. So that might already all be there. I'm just hedging my bets because I don't know if it's that complete.
That's a conversation that staff is going to have with the bridging architect to find out just how far along those plans were and if they are bridging documents or if they were sort of part of the charrette process and more preliminary.
We have Alan Maris would like to speak.
Alan Maris. At one time, I think we were considering solar power, and I didn't see it anywhere in here. And I know that we're going to look at ongoing costs as well, and what would be the impact of solar power if that's been discussed and discarded. Could you enlighten us?
We do have a board resolution to do as much sustainable architecture as we can. So that would certainly be considered. The buildings would certainly be built capable of taking the solar panels. Whether we could include them within the budget is another question.
But when you do your design build document, is it possible to list that as a contingency?
Yes.
Thank you.
Charlie and Kevin, and if we're going to continue this, we're going to have to extend the meeting.
Just a short comment to answer Heather's question. I think the difference now compared to before is you maybe have some idea of budget constraints now that didn't exist before. So the value of actually having the design committee and the sustainability committee look at this would be looking at it with the eye that you've only got maybe $38, $39 million to work with, which really wasn't, I don't think, part of the original discussion. And I'm not sure, did we actually design this in consideration of the CHIPS resolution, the Collaborative for High Performance Schools.
We did design this per chips. I don't remember what the score was, but we have that sheet.
Okay. Kevin?
To answer the earlier question, I do remember energy efficiency, green roofs, a green roof, and solar panels being a part of the discussion. I don't remember if they got into the final design. I do have a clarifying question. Is the board asking us, Ocean View and the site, the staff, to meet, and then the board would then meet again to vote, because there's we keep talking about urgency, and I really like the idea of looking at the term menu keeps coming up, and I really like that idea because I think we can save a lot of money doing that. But I wanted to know if
the board
that was
needs to approve the final contract. So at some point, the board will look at what the design build companies are proposing to do. I'm not sure the board needs to approve the bridging documents. I don't think we did that on our other projects. So it would move forward to the bid phase, and then it would come back to the board. The board would decide whether to go ahead with the project as bid. Are we ready to adjourn the meeting, or is there something else we need to get done?
Just for clarification, is this because this is a review and action item? Is just this direction to staff? This is not something the board has to vote for. I have 5 very clear steps and a couple of priority steps that we know we need to work
You want to read them out,
on.
and then we can have a motion and vote? Would the board like that? To vote on the action items that that Val has written out there. Since this is an action item, she would like a formal vote.
You don't have to. I didn't know if it was just direction to staff.
No, okay, this is direction. I think the board has agreed, everybody has spoken. I think that's the direction to staff. That is the action.
Okay. I do, before you adjourn, I really want to thank all of you for coming. I know many of you didn't get a chance to speak, but I wanted to make sure we had the expertise in the room. So I want to thank you all. Wow, wonderful. Thank you all for your time. I know it's a light night, so thank you, and turn it back to you, President-elect, to adjourn.
Thank you all for coming out, and the meeting is adjourned.